Well, hi. Ah. Somehow, yet, as much as things happen, it feels like almost nothing happened. Hello. Welcome to Vision Denial and the series that I've dubbed Clearing Vision of MSI, where I'm going to be, analyzing and hopefully clearing the smoke that comes with each day for the Rumble stages, at least today. I've been doing this since the start of it. What was I going to say? Right. If there's any questions regarding like why am I doing this, what is this? Well, I did like 76 videos for each playoff series that existed for all the 12 regions, and I have done a video for every day of MSI so far. So I've been at it. So with that, let us start with the day, because I don't think much has changed. I don't even intend on changing my power ranking. Spoilers for the end of the video. Right. The way that I had my power ranking for the teams from yesterday, God, I gotta get used to this, because I can't. There you go. From like first, second, and third, and I got this one, fourth, fifth, and sixth. That's how I expected the power ranking to go. So far, nothing about even today has changed that thought for me. Let's get into it then. With the first game of the day, with our Pentanet versus Royal Never Give Up. And honestly, thank you for picking something different for chat, something that had a little bit more, gumption, can do stuff when behind. I mean, it's not great. It's not much better. Not a fan of solo lane Lee Sin, despite the fact that it does well in lane. I don't think it does well outside of lane. But much better in the drafting area. Nice. It's still a little complicated to play. Less nice, especially if you're a team that is gonna get out executed. When you start recording and then your cat really wants something. Say hello. Yeah? Okay. Where was I saying? Oh, right. Good job on the drafting. It's much better than the other drafts that you've had so far across the board, but oh, come on. But when you're trying to pick something like this with a lot of scaling, very little in terms of engage, or very limited engage options that exist that require a lot of setup, and there's a lot of scaling that comes from it, but then you go on to the other side and it's similar, but there's better picking tools. You wind up in deep shit territory very quickly. Now, and I wrote here both teams need early leads, and the team that I expected to do early leads better was, of course, RNG. Who's surprised? No one. That being said, I was super surprised, and pleasantly so, by the level 1 and the lane swap. That was top tier primo stuff, buddy. Pentanet, keep doing shit like this. You overstate it a little bit, because this was definitely going to help leverage the disadvantages your composition had early on, but you kept trying to overdo the lane swap to try to mitigate or try to avoid any lane matchups that you thought wouldn't work, and in the end it just wound up with you losing your tempo, or losing the tempo lead that you had garnered from this, because this was solid execution from minute 1 through 5. Yeah, minute 1 through 5, you guys had a solid execution of this particular strategy. 10 out of 10. Keep it up. Do stuff like this. You'll catch out Cloud9 and Paris Saint-Germain. I don't know about that, but you'll probably catch out Cloud9 easily with stuff like this. Like, you keep up these level 1 plays, great. But yeah, you overdo it, and unfortunately, because you overdo it and you're trying to avoid all these lane matchups, Royal Never Give Up just kind of opts into saying, hey, sure, we'll just take our years of experiences of already doing this type of meta and get every neutral, the first turret, tempo, and a 2k lead. You did well for the first 5 minutes, and then after that, it just went all to shit. Because RNG showed better wave manipulation, and I think the casters even mentioned it. They had great lane assignments from it all. And as much as like Pentanet, I love the proactivity, and I love that you guys are not just letting yourselves get, suffocated. Your proactivity in fighting these fights just doesn't lead anywhere, and the answers tend to leave you in a gold deficit. And I think it's something that you need to start recognizing is when a fight leads to something long term versus when a fight is just a fight where you find an opportunity. Because sometimes just finding an opportunity is good and all, but if you're doing it proactively, when you're like, all right, we can go here, take a gank, get a kill, and then reset, but on the other side, you're losing 3-4 different turret plates and a dragon, and possibly like your bottom quadrant. Like, you're not gonna, it's not an equivalent exchange. Sure, they're responding, but they're responding in a way that like benefits them more from a mistake that you made that, like, on the surface level doesn't look like a mistake. Yeah, and then eventually RNG ballooned the gold lead super well. They skipped steps, unfortunately. RNG is doing this mistake again where they're being a little too hyphy. They just kind of like go without taking the proper steps to get this to get the objectives properly. And like, sure, RNG, this is the 5th time you faced this team. You're now 5-0 against them, but that doesn't stop the fact that Pentanet is still learning how to face off against you. Like, they have figured out a way to play out better than most of the other teams so far. And even if they're not like executing it in the best regards, you shouldn't be skipping steps, especially if people are going to be watching these and going like, oh, this is how the 6th place team did it. Maybe we should probably take this but do it better. And then you're going to be in like a really rough position when you don't know how to respond to it properly because you're skipping steps. Otherwise, they have a relatively okay closing out of this from RNG. They had an inefficient Baron, and PGG punished well enough the way that they were playing their Baron, because it was pretty bad. But RNG still is the better team overall. They have better team fighting. They're better at recognizing their win conditions and closing out games when it needs to be done, and so they do. And then with that, RNG go 3-0 and PGG go 0-3. Next up, I'm going to pull away these people here. We got ourselves Damwon Kia versus Cloud9. And guys, Cloud9, this is really weird to see, especially since the analysts and everybody seem to think that you no longer are an early game team, but then you play this game and you play this game like your usual selves as an early game team. Cool, great, love that you're back on form, but also your back on form is terrible. Not great. I think that it's interesting that you opt for this very complicated approach of a composition. There's like zero. I wrote zero engage. You have an Ash arrow. That's a non-committal engage, but it's also like super situational. You'd have to be super far ahead in the game for it to be worth anything. And I'm stuck here thinking, well, like, why are they doing this type of composition, right? And that's because it requires an early lead. And they're like, well, we're an early game team. Damwon is not an early game team. Let's do this. The issue is that you let them pick a scaling comp and then outscale you and out team fight you. Guys, you need to also like draft in a way that prevents the team from having something that straight up hurts your MO at the end of the day. And like by all means, this is I don't think there's anything bad with this draft. I don't think that that Cloud9 though is even capable of doing drafts like this. Sure, it might be what you practice, but like simplicity, guys. You're in 5th place, arguably 6th, depending on how you want to argue Pentanet's going to beat you, which I don't think they will, but you're like at this point, you keep picking these very complicated compositions and then getting out executed by other teams. Damwon, on the other hand, again, you guys just flub up the early game. I'm like, what is going on, guys? At the end of the day, Sure, I will attest to the fact that this is very different to the other times Damwon is behind in the early game. This feels much better, comparatively speaking, because they were keeping up. They were making sure that they were proactive on stuff to make sure that their win conditions were being met and that they were not losing behind or allowing the team to balloon a lot, which is very different than the vast majority of games they played so far in the tournament. That shows improvement. Great. I love improvement. 10 out of 10. The thing that bothers me the most, though, is that, like, where was it again? It was at the, oh yeah, it took it to the 25-minute mark to have Damwon all of a sudden just decide, alright, cool, time to win, instead of, any other point in the game. And, like, credit where credit is also due, because I mentioned they still kept up, and this was very different from other times where they're behind in the game and then they just win randomly. This time they were playing to their win conditions and keeping up in a way that like mattered. They weren't just going through the motions of things. And they had a composition that, strictly speaking, did take a while before it hit its major power spikes. But it still had other tools to be able to not just stay behind the entire time. And like slowly but surely this gold lead did shrink, but it also took like it took 17 minutes for the gold lead to shrink. And by all means, when they got the gold lead finally on their end, then it just grew. It ballooned very well. The issue still comes along with, like, why did you wait still till the 25-minute? Cloud9, your use of waves and of a sieging composition is just pretty bad overall. You had Baron with 280 carries and 2 enchanters. Damwon should never be able to approach you. This game frustrates me on levels that are, and I didn't think I'd get frustrated from this, right? When I was watching it, I was like, okay, it's whatever. It's another Cloud9, can't close out the game. They played the early game, whatever, and Damwon just came back. But I'm going over these notes that I wrote over here, and I'm going over, like, the different, like, timestamps that I have here. And I'm honestly flabbergasted by how freaking consistent it is that, like, sure, Damwon is expected to get out, but Damwon isn't, like, showing anything that tells me that they're going to be, like, significantly better than Paris Saint-Germain or Cloud9. Like, they're more consistent, sure, but they're not much better. And Cloud9 is just showing me that they don't know how to play to their win conditions. And that they don't understand why picking complicated compositions are just not good for them. They should be picking simple compositions and playing through their more consistent players. They give, like, what do they do here? They gave Udyr still to Blabber, a champion that by all rights he's shown proficiency in, and Blabber was doing some really questionable map movement and questionable positioning. Like, what's happening, guys? Like, come on. Hopefully they get this corrected, because I don't think they brought their substitute jungler for Cloud9. They think they brought in Zion Spartan Darshan. I don't know which one he's going by now. To like for Fudge, which I don't know why, because Blabber, holy smokes, holy smokes. With that, DK is still the best closing team of the league. They closed very efficiently and had a better Baron, and yeah, that's just what it is. DK go 2-1, while C9 go 0-3, being winless still. Next, we go back to having Mad versus Royal Never Give Up. So we get our Lions versus our Angels here. I don't know if they use the Angel motif still. We got Mad versus our Royals here. And this was, to me, and a lot of people said, oh, look, it's going to be like, it's like the finals preview. And I'm like, sure, maybe. That really depends on Mad's consistency more than anything else. But this was interesting to watch, more or less. I think it was super interesting because Mad has shown a consistent, like, has shown his proficiency at playing the mid game through and through, as well as being competent at reading how jungle map movement or jungle movement for each of the teams that have been playing. Right, they're I think the strongest jungle team that we have at the tournament. Elyoya may not be the strongest jungler, but like as a team overall, they're fairly solid regarding that. That with it, however, RNG is still the more cohesive team overall, and they show it from beginning, middle, and end. There's like this weird period near the end of the game where RNG is straight up just having some bizarre decisions that really cost them some of their tempo, but throughout the whole thing, RNG have the tempo lead and play towards their win conditions. Mad are trying to keep up the entire time, but they lose gold and like pacing throughout the entire thing. In at different levels, RNG are ballooning the gold lead incredibly quickly, or incredibly like slowly in one part and quickly in others, depending on like different moments of the game. There's very few fights, comparatively speaking, to a lot of the other games, but this is still a fairly long game. Alright, I'm just going over my notes again. Right, and there's something weird about like RNG and their Barons being super inefficient. Like, Royal, you guys have Baron. Like, you don't have to just keep team fighting and then just not using the Baron for the best of its ability. You use it to collect gold and map pressure to like be able to eventually close, not as like the uber steroid as it's supposed to be. Like, RNG seem to have a track record of playing their Baron like it's Elder Drake. And like, it would be one thing if they had very competitive teams against them, but I don't think any of the teams have been quote unquote competitive. I mean, like a little bit from Mad, but this is not it. Like, this wasn't what I would consider competitive in the same way that like in the LPL, Fun Plus and EDG and Top Esports were competitive against them during the playoff series. This is not the same thing at all. The RNG still closed the game out fairly well. Like, good on them. Because they need to show that they're still able to do so. What surprised me though is that like they had 3 Barons this game. Like, they kept going back and forth, like back to the Baron over and over. And this is not something super common that they did with their playoff series. Because like you want to avoid taking Baron so many times because it means you're dragging out the game in a ways that allow the other team to catch up very easily. Like it gives them more options and more opportunities to steal the Baron and then just get back into the game. But they still closed the game out fairly well, regardless of it, regardless of the Baron dependency that I wrote here for some reason. But and Mad are still doing very well in terms of punishing RNG for some of their more ridiculous mistakes. And this game, despite the loss, helped me see that Mad, despite some of their fumbles early in during their group stages, are I think the shoe-in for second place for the moment with the consistency they have, and I think being the most competitive team against RNG. But granted, this is only one game against RNG, and it's still not even the round one being done of this the double round robin of Rumble stage. So like this could change 100% depending on like if Mad Lions decide all of a sudden to just lose their consistency so far that they've had. But you know, good job, Mad. Slight improvements in better early game play and better ballooning of your leads, and you're likely to possibly beat them. Because RNG also needs to like clean up their act, especially for the team fighting sections. And the casters and analysts mention it. Like they're a team that like their team fighting is really clean or just nowhere. And this is the same thing in this tournament so far. They like have had very clean team fights and then some very questionable team fights. And it didn't matter much because they don't have competition so far, and that's saying for the state of how the rest of the world plays compared to the LPL. With that, Mad go 2-1, and RNG go 4-0, still being lossless. Next, we got Cloud9 versus PSG Saint-Germain, and I think this is the one that solidified in a lot of people's minds who are the top four and who are going to be the two that are eliminated. And I can't say that, like, because these tournaments are always a little wild and wacky sometimes, that this is definitely going to be the case. But I'm in agreement a little bit, because Cloud9 again opt into a complicated composition and then get out-executed. I do think that the way that they did this pick ban, regardless of the end result, the way they pulled it off is cool. I appreciate that they both their B2 and 3 after seeing Lee Sin, they picked counters for both the mid lane and the top lane against Lee Sin. As much as I think that Victor might be a Lee Sin counter, which I think was a solid move on their part, and the way that they're drafting. Like, I'm giving a lot of flack to Cloud9 for picking compositions that are really awful for them, or just awful in general. But the way that they're approaching the drafting phase itself, the way that they approach drafting in general, is solid, right? Like, they think ahead of time what would hinder their composition more and set themselves up for the thing that they're looking for. It's just really unfortunate that sometimes the composition in and of itself is just bad, or they're just unable to execute it. Yeah, like, just sorry for the pause of like my brain for a moment, but it's really bizarre because PSG Saint-Germain, for all like accounts and purposes here, our team that are, you know, above the like just above average across the board. They come from a region with very mediocre to very awful teams, and no one can compete against them. And then they come here and there's a little bit of competition, but they're still doing fairly well, all things considered, right? I wasn't expecting them. I had like concerns over how they were going to compete, and so far they're meeting the concerns just well enough. especially against teams that have like solid early games usually. And Cloud9, again with a solid early game lead, just didn't do anything with it. They were not ballooning their lead properly to be able to do anything. And with it, Paris Saint-Germain slowly but surely, using their win conditions, grabbed the tempo lead out of Cloud9. The vision, I think, in this game for both of these teams is a little lackluster and pretty poor, given like the average of the tournament so far. It's fairly shallow for Paris Saint-Germain, so there's not a lot of like active information, and it's extra defensive by the side of Cloud9. Even when it was starting off and they had the early tempo lead from the level 1, it still was fairly defensive, and I want both of these teams to be a little bit more cognizant of how to approach their vision to not just be defensive, but also be efficient. Cloud9, again, are still making bizarre choices that are from Blabber or from literally any of them at this point. That's a little unfair because like there are some that are more guilty than others in that team, but it's still overall a team that are making bizarre map choices and bizarre engages that get punished very easily, and then it loses them any particular advantage. And when PSG grabbed the lead from it, they ballooned it very well, and had a much Baron. And they had, like, I think the cleanest Baron so far up until this point. Like, this is the 4th game of the day. And they had a much cleaner Baron than most of the other teams all day. Really weirded me out. And PSG closed well, which is like a far cry. They're not a very good closing team usually. And so I'm happy to see that they did that. Or at least they're not very good at closing in their region. But so far, like, seeing this, good signs for PSG. I like these guys, especially since they're playing with a substitute, and the cohesion that I had an issue with previously with how they played with Doggo is slowly but surely going away. They are looking much more coordinated than a team that's still playing their 5-man roster. With that, Cloud9 end of the day 0-4, still without a win in the first round robin, and PSG go 2-1. Next on the docket, we have... Oh, sometimes these icons are too small. Pentanet versus Damwon Kia. And, like, we all watched this, right? That's not true. Some of you who are watching this have yet to watch it and are just kind of listening in on my thoughts. But my God, this was a slaughter. This wasn't the fastest game of the tournament, but this was a pre-20-minute game, which is really rough. Couple of things. I really like this composition out of Pentanet. Nice. Good job. I like this, guys. You had engage, you had a solid front line. It wasn't looking like anything super weird coming out of you. And you still allow Chaz to have a pick that allowed him to show some skill expression. 10 out of 10. Great approach to the pick and ban and all around solid stuff. And DK still allowed themselves to play how DK does. But we can't just leave it at that without talking about the fact that Pabu has the wrong runes, literally off of user error. And I'm like, alright, that feels bad. This is whatever. But it's a disaster from, like, almost minute 1. Damwon do a level 1 invade, which is awesome. Fantastic. I love seeing that this team that has 0 remarks for doing early games usually is doing an early game. And, like, better late than never. And I'm happy that you're doing it against Pentanet, because at least it shows that if you can do it, you're going to be able to be very competitive and much stronger at it than a team that, by all rights, I think is like 10th, no, 9th maybe in the entire tournament in terms of like power ranking. I would have to visit against my power ranking, but like this was really rough, and I don't think this was a good showing of early game by Damwon, and more like a series of misplays by Pentanet that were not recoverable, or at least that showed that they could not recover from something like this. And by the time that the early game had been done, Damwon did what Damwon does when they have a gold lead, and they balloon it very quickly. And it goes really out of hand. They accelerate the tempo to a point that is a literal just nightmare for Pentanet to handle. And they still, on purpose, elongate the game for reasons that are just very unclear. You guys could have finished this game at 18 minutes instead of 19 minutes and 30 seconds. Oh. Yeah. It's just a very quick, clean game by Damwon that showed that they can still play an early game. Which begs the question, where was this, guys? Where was this early game this entire time? Like, oh boy. Where did you find the time to make the strategy happen, execute it very well, but never use it on any other team? Please use strategies like this against other teams, please. Like, anytime tomorrow, even. Then it would probably push you up again on the list. Maybe. I just kind of want to see you guys do well and not show that your team was just carried by nuggery. And with that, DK go 3-1, and Pentanet are tied with Cloud9 at 0-4. My pencils are broken. No. I got another one. Oh, God. So, we've got, after that, from that, the last game of the day was, interesting, to say the least. And by interesting, I mean just like fairly good on both sides. We got ourselves Mad Lions versus Paris Saint-Germain as the last game of the day, which is another rematch game. I think we have, yeah, we had 3 rematch games today, which was bound to happen, right? And this was also a game that like solidified for me the way that Mad were like second place, and that they are the most consistent team so far, which is really good because I like to see the fact that this has changed, that they become more consistent overall. I want to talk to whoever drafted this for PSG. You limited your damage options, and you hovered Twisted Fate, where like, sure, it's not much more damage, but at least it would have put you in a bigger variety and more options for when Doggo dies on Kaisa and you guys can't fight back, because Morgana is not going to build enough damage as a jungler to compete for whatever was happening late game. Yes, this was really bizarre from them. Like, sure, it's simple though. I like the fact that it was a simple composition. They didn't have to think too hard about it, and they did it against a 1-4 composition. And usually, front-to-back team fighting compositions tend to do better. Mostly because of the execution element, and mostly because when you're in a 5v4 and you have a composition that's better and designed to fight against a composition that's meant to just withstand, you usually win from that. I think that I am a big fan of how often these teams are doing level 1 plays. It does a great job to make sure that you have the tempo lead, to keep track of jungle, allows yourself to have a better template and setup for all of the different plays you want to do in the early game. It's pretty good. I think that it's unfortunate that despite the level 1 play that they did, PSG didn't think to do anything about the warding or about the lack of vision or the vision that Mad did have. They had a pretty cheeky level 1 play where they stole the chickens, the raptors, and then went up to gank Humanoid and get the flash really easily. And then they try to repeat that a bunch of times when Humanoid just kept warding that spot that he got ganked from. As if it wasn't just an obvious solution. You could have just swept it and then just approached the place a different way. This was a little bizarre. Like, I don't know why that wasn't a thought that came through your mind. Despite the way that the tempo lead was gained by PSG on the level 1 play, Mad eventually they're much more proactive. Sweet stuff, love it. Proactivity is literally the key for this meta. And absorb any pressure that Paris Saint-Germain or PSG would have had against them. Like, the Talons can only do so much from it. They were still pretty neck and neck in keeping up the entire time. It was really unfortunate, though, that when Mad gained the tempo lead, that they didn't do anything to, balloon the gold much more than it needed to. Because and this is probably the biggest difference maker for me between teams, is how good are they at ballooning leads against teams that are like supposed to be like weaker than them, or how well are they able to balloon leads from tempo that they got, right? And frankly, Damwon is really good at ballooning leads late game. RNG is good at ballooning leads, and PSG are good at ballooning leads against people that are much weaker than them. Mad Lions hasn't shown necessarily a consistency at being able to balloon leads. Cloud9 I can't see ever being able to balloon leads in a way that are like consistent either. But this is, I don't know why it was so hard for them to do anything regarding like how they approached ballooning their gold lead, because PSG was keeping up with them, sure, but they kept consistently shrinking the lead over and over again, which means that they were not doing the setups properly to choke out anything that PSG had. It's very fortunate for Mad Lions, though, that they had a composition that had more damage options and scaled better technically. Because I think otherwise PSG would have probably done much better with the fact that they were able to keep shrinking gold leads from them and even like catch up. Now, there's a lot of mistakes that Mad Lions do, but I don't think they do them so frequently that it's like memorable or noticeable on a lot of occasions. A couple of hiccups here and there. So it's good to see that they are playing this out well enough, and I'm okay with the fact that they won through drafting practically. It may not look like that for a lot of people, but it's pretty much what happened. And with this game, Mad clean out with a fairly efficient Baron. And they close very cleanly. Good job. Really solid stuff. Mad go 3-1, and PSG go 2-2. I remember that? Yeah, that's right. With that, I would usually go like, here's my reasoning for why I changed the ranking thing. But like, my ranking doesn't change here, right? Mad Lions has shown a much more consistency throughout the tournament than Damwon has. They're more consistency in terms of early, mid, and late game. Whilst Damwon has shown that they're consistent in the late game and good at team fighting and punishing, but that they don't show any consistency about the way they approach the early and mid game. RNG is going to be at the top because they're currently, nothing's touching them in skill, per lane matchup, or in map movement, wave manipulation, neutral objective setups. There might be like a contest for like how cleanly they close or how well they use the Baron, but overall, no one's been challenging them in any way, shape, or form. Pentanet I put last because it's Pentanet. Not to be like rude, but I don't even think Pentanet was the better of the teams that were not part of the like tier 3 and tier 4 options that existed. Unfortunately, we won't really know because that's the way it is. But I do appreciate that they're improving slowly and surely. Cloud9, however, feel like every time they take one step forward, they take 2 steps back. Every day of this tournament. And it's very fortunate for them that they have a very huge head start in terms of like how to approach winning the game with a lead, how like to close it out. They don't do it very well, but they still have a better lead than Pentanet does, and they have a better lead in terms of how to get an early game. And then Paris Saint-Germain is in 4th place because they're better than the other two. But like nothing from the first day of Rumble stage or the second day of Rumble stage has changed my mind regarding how these are set up. You guys let me know what you think in the comments down below. Is there any standout moments? Is there something specific about like how some of the teams have been playing that changed your mind about like who you think are favorites or an underdog? Let me know. I appreciate all of you who do watch. It's very I like seeing people who are, you know, taking the time at least a little bit to listen in if they have it in the background and just watching in general. Makes this thing that I do for fun much more fun. Like and subscribe if you do enjoy the video. I have over here, just as per usual, I'll have the playlist to the Road of MSI series that I had, where I watched every region's playoff series, yes, including that one, which is how I get my educated analysis from all of these games that I've been also covering in MSI, and I'll put the playlist for that, our Clearing Vision series, where I've just been doing an analysis of every day so far for MSI. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in tomorrow.